Mark quotes from Isaiah the prophet, "Behold, I am sending my messenger ahead of you. He will prepare your way, a voice of one crying out in the desert, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight his paths." What powerful words from the prophet Isaiah. And actually, we don't need to get into any of this, but Mark actually, or Jesus, whichever the case is, misquoted. And so part of this quote is from somebody other than Isaiah. But who cares, right? I mean, the words are so rich. So God is sending a messenger, and naturally we presume that refers to John the Baptist. But again, is he the only one? Or might each of us also be that messenger that God sends? That we would help one another prepare the way for each other, and certainly for those who may have little idea of what it's like to, again, choose to be as faithful a follower of Jesus as possible. And we may not be a voice crying out in the desert, but the desert, we know, is a symbol for a number of different realities. The desert is where we come to know ourselves. And the desert and the Holy Land in Israel, Palestine, was fairly much a barren place. And yes, we've got barren places like that here in the United States, in Nevada, Death Valley. However, having lived 12 years in Arizona, the desert at certain parts of the year can be extremely beautiful, with cacti blooming all over the place and other desert plants as well. But it doesn't make any difference if they're green plants in the desert. It's still an isolated, desolate kind of place. You don't want to get lost in it, or if you do, I have an aunt who lives in Tucson, and she took a number of courses from the University of Arizona, and she could survive in the desert because she knows where she could get water. She knows which vegetation is edible, so she could very well thrive in the desert. Not me. My luck would be that I'd get too close to one of those cacti that throws its needles, and after I'm stung, I'd probably back up and fall into it. Not quite for me. But we want to keep in mind the powerful symbol that the desert is, that the chosen people of God, freed from the slavery of Egypt, spent all that time wandering in the desert. Why? So that they could come to know God as God is. They had lived in the land of Egypt, which certainly did not believe in the one God of creation. And so they, after they were freed from slavery, came to Mount Sinai. God gives them laws, and those laws were again intended only to help guide the people to an open, trusting, loving relationship with God. And there are years in the desert. I mean, we say that they're 40 years. Again, we need to be attentive to the symbol of 40. It's just simply a time of preparation, a time of taking whatever time we need to do our best to center our lives again on the goodness of an all-loving God. And we see how God took care of the people in the desert. Perhaps more importantly is Jesus' time in the desert after his baptism, as he provided himself the time to integrate what it meant for him as a Jewish person to have God call him God's beloved Son. And we too spend time, perhaps not in the desert, but we spend time alone, and of course parents of young children or middle school children or high school children, high school youth, might find it difficult to find that private time just simply to be with God, to reflect on what it means to us that we would see ourselves as God does, as the beloved of God.